Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie Carlos, Executive Director of xMinds, and I want to welcome you to our primers on MCPS placements. This is session 3, and we will be discussing elementary school placements. Our goal this evening is to give you a clear, comprehensive overview of the services and programs MCPS offers to support autistic students at the elementary school level. Our speakers are all MCPS staff, administrators, program and instructional specialists, and psychologists. They all know these programs inside and out. We're very grateful to them for being here to share what they know. Just as there is a wide range in the support needs of students who are autistic, there is a correspondingly wide range of programs that MCPS offers to support these kids. The first half of our session tonight will cover all the different diploma-bound placements: homeschool model, connections, social emotional special education services, school-based learning centers, and the Carl Sandburg Learning Center. The final presentations will cover learning for independence, school community-based services, classic autism services, and extensions. You might have noticed that tonight's presentations will cover programs from those providing the least support to those providing the most. Although please remember that in practice, there is overlap among the programs. We have asked our presenters to minimize jargon, but if you hear something you don't understand, please ask for clarification in the chat. I want to take a moment to thank and acknowledge Chris Erickson tonight. She is supervisor of Autism Spectrum Disorder Services. Chris and her team have worked very hard to make these primers possible. They recognize the importance of bringing this information to the autism community, and we are grateful for their help in making this happen. Other key MCPS administrators who may be dropping in tonight, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge them if they come by. Dr. Margaret Cage, Chief Student Support Officer, Division of Specialized Support Services, and Dr. Tyree Jenkins, Executive Director for the Division of Specialized Support Services. Now, many of you will have questions, and we will have questions halfway through and then at the end. And so I urge you to write your questions for the presenters in the chat as they come to you and at any time. And when we get to the Q&A session, we'll read them out to the presenters when we get to that break. Alternatively, when we get to Q&A, you can use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and we'll call on you to ask your question out loud. Another few words about questions. I want you to know that our presenters tonight will not be able to answer questions about where your individual child will fit best. Ultimately, where your child is placed will be a decision made by you and your IEP team. And keep in mind that each location or school may differ. Students' IEPs and schedules are indeed individualized, so their experiences may vary. The good news is that tonight you are where you should be to learn about the various placement options. We have asked the speakers to provide you tonight with a level of detail that is frankly hard to find. We host this event year after year because we believe the more you know about autism services and programs, the better advocate you can be for your child when it comes to placement decisions. Finally, before we start the presentation, I want to quickly mention we are recording this in both English and Spanish. We'll make the recordings and presentation slides available to you in a few days. To get us started, I want to welcome Ms. Jada Langston, Director of the Department of Special Education Services. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Ms. Langston.
Thank you all, and thank you again for having us. We hope that tonight's presentation is very informative to you as you learn about our services. And I will share with you our organizational chart and our mission and vision and strategic priorities for special education in MCPS this year. Next slide. So we'd like to make sure that everyone knows and puts a face with the name of our Division of Specialized Support Services. I bring you greetings tonight from Dr. Cage, our Chief of Student Support Services, as well as Dr. Tyree Jenkins, our Executive Director of the Division of Student Specialized Support Services, our Associate Superintendent of Division of Special Education Services, Dr. Lisa Galier-Jones, and our Fiscal Supervisor, Mr. Rob Bird. Next slide. Dr. Cage is the Chief of Specialized Support Student Services, with our Director of Counseling Services, Dr. Karen Cruz, our Director of Psychological Services, Dr. Christina Connolly, our Director of Student Engagement, Behavioral Health, and Academics, Dr. Shauna K. Jordanby, and our Director of Student Support Services, Steve Ness. Under Shauna K. is also Stephanie Wallace, who is our Supervisor of Wellbeing Support for our social workers. Again, I'm Jada Langston, Director of Special Education Services, and under me I have my supervisors. I have Ashley Doyle as our Supervisor of Alternative Learning Outcomes, Ms. Chris Eckerson, our Supervisor of Autism. We have Dr. Webb with us for one more day until she retires, and we have appreciated her services. Our Supervisor of Special Education Services, we are looking for someone for Kelly Geron's position, and we have Pat Cochran, who is our Supervisor of Transition Services. Erica Williams is our Director of Special Education for Pre-K Services. She has Samantha Smith, who is our Supervisor for Hearing and Vision. We are looking for our Supervisor of Physical Disability Services. We have Shelley McCauley, our Supervisor of Speech and Language Services, and we have Faith Fishel, who is our Supervisor of Child Find and Early Childhood Disabilities. Next slide. Our mission, our vision, and our strategic plan. Our mission and vision and values and action are very much aligned, if not the same as the MCPS strategic plan for the 2025 to 2030 year. Our mission is breaking barriers and building futures. We want to deliver high-impact, inclusive supports that empower students with disabilities to be engaged fully, think critically, and develop resilience and thrive in life and learning. Our vision is success for all students. Students with disabilities are supported to achieve meaningful academic, social, and emotional growth, graduating or entering the workforce, ready to thrive with skills, confidence, and resilience to succeed in their communities as well as beyond. And our values and action are very much the same as the MCPS strategic plan, that we are guided by learning, respect, relationships, excellence, and equity. We strive to create environments where students with disabilities are included and supported for services. Our strategic priorities are 3. Student performance. We want to close the performance gap for our students for all students in reading and math. We want to create opportunities to implement processes and structures so that outcomes are not predicted by race. We want to reduce the disproportionality of our Black and Brown students receiving special education services to 2% or lower across schools. And we also want to target support and professional learning and coaching for those schools. We also want to expand and support inclusive opportunities for students who receive special education services. We want to increase the number of students who are in more inclusive settings over the next 3 years, and also strengthen communication and collaboration by making sure schools have consistent outreach practices and accessible resources for students with disabilities. Next slide. Our equity commitments. The Division of Specialized Support Services is a comprehensive multidimensional department in MCPS. We're responsible for special education instruction, student support services, and work related to well-being, learning, and achievement. We work to develop, manage, and continuously evaluate a wide range of programs and initiatives designed to meet the needs of diverse learners, including special education, early childhood identification services. Our work is grounded in the belief that equitable access that provide high-quality instruction and support is essential for all students. When we look at addressing a disproportionality by actively monitoring and dismantling the long-standing national trend of over-identifying students of color as having an emotional or intellectual disability, and the disproportionate suspension of the students as well. This work includes root cause analysis, disaggregated data monitoring, and implementation of evidence-based interventions. By building the capacity through professional learning, we are providing ongoing professional learning opportunities and job-embedded coaching for schools based on the multi-tiered systems or support, MCPS, child find process, nonviolent crisis intervention, positive behavior interventions and supports, PBIS, or as well as implicit and implicit bias and restorative justice. When we look at strengthening academic outcomes for students receiving special education services through cross-divisional collaboration, ensuring that innovative instructional practices are implemented with fidelity for all. And finally, expanding equitable access to provide critical resources and opportunities, including psychological assessments, post-secondary readiness through examples of FAFSA completion and targeted interventions for chronically absent students. Next slide. We are aligned with the MCPS strategic plan, the blueprint for the state of Maryland, as well as Maryland Transforms, which is focused on students with disabilities. We want to increase our partnership and participation with students and families by increasing our participation and proficiency rates on the MCAP and alt-MCAP assessments, scheduling students for the least restricted environment and first inclusion, with our family and community partnerships, strengthening pre-K readiness, acting on parent survey feedback, and guaranteeing multilingual two-way communication. With our equity and well-being, reducing the disproportionality in discipline and ensuring IEP 504 compliance, support the plan's focus on equitable opportunities and the whole child well-being. And finally, organizational excellence, tracking our process through fiscal impacts of private placement, settlements, reinforcing accountability and stewardship in the line of the plan's governance goals. Next slide. We do have challenges in special education in the areas of achievement and readiness, equity and inclusion, and accountability. When we look at achievement and readiness, our student proficiency rates are below the state targets in MCAP, the alt-MCAP, high school math, and ALO performance. We have a wide achievement gap between students with IEPs and without. Our pre-K and PEP programs readiness indicators are far below expectations, only 30% in inclusive settings versus 64%, which is our target. In equity and inclusion, the limited access to the least restricted environment, the LRE targets miss across all grade spans. The overrepresentation of students in restrictive environments, the disproportionality in discipline, our Black and African American students with IEPs face higher suspension expulsion rates, which is greater than 2%, and our parent survey results, satisfaction and response rates show engagement gaps, especially among families of preschool and school-age children. Lastly, compliance and stewardship. There's a sharp increase in state complaints from 20 to 125 in 2 years, and due process requests from 200 to now 2,172 in 2025. Lastly, the overuse of alternative assessments and the excessive restraint use. We need for a more stronger accountability and systems to ensure fidelity and implementation. Next slide. As we continue with strategies for improvement, again, looking at the areas of achievement and readiness, equity and inclusion, and compliance and accountability, as a division, our goal is clear: to improve outcomes for students with disability by closing the achievement gaps, reducing disproportionality in discipline, and expanding inclusive opportunities in the least restricted environment. We believe we will achieve this goal through evidence-based instruction, data-driven monitoring, professional learning, and strong family and community engagement. Our transition to accomplish this is our work anchored in the three key priority areas: student performance, disproportionality, and inclusive opportunities. With student performance in the area of our goal to increase proficiency rates of students with disabilities by 10% over the next 3 years, while also reducing achievement gaps by 5% each year. To achieve this, we are implementing targeted interventions across all schools, providing quarterly coaching to special education teachers, and monitoring IEP goals progress on a regular basis. In disproportionality, we know our data shows that our Black and African American students with IEPs face a higher risk of suspension and expulsion. Our goal is to reduce that rate by 2% by 2027. This will be accomplished by requiring annual disproportionality action plans by identified schools, training 100% of staff in restorative practices at high suspension schools, and leveraging real-time data dashboards to monitor discipline trends quarterly and make timely adjustments. Lastly, in the area of inclusive opportunities, our goal is to increase the number of students with disabilities being educated in general education classrooms by 10% by 2027. We'll achieve this by expanding co-teaching inclusive models in all schools, ensuring at least 90% of educators receive annual training in inclusive practices and assistive technology, and creating more consistent opportunities for two-way engagement with families, with each school hosting at least 2 engagement opportunities per year. Together, these 3 priorities, student performance, disproportionality, and inclusive opportunities, represent the foundation of our improvement plan. They align directly with the MCPS strategic plan and the blueprint for Maryland's future, ensuring that we not only meet compliance expectations, but also deliver on a commitment to equity and excellence for every student. Next slide. As we look at our strategies for improvement, currently this year, we have provided professional learning on the present level school writing, restorative justice, behavior discipline strategies in lieu of suspension, wraparound services for partnership, and our best practices in implementing FBAs and BIPs. We're continuing to increase support in cultural competency training and utilizing co-teaching as a strategy for providing specially designed instruction in our schools. That is our plan for this year with special education and our work around the strategic priorities and strategies for improvement. Thank you. We'll now turn it over back to the program to Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Langston. Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. LaTanya Williams. Dr. Williams is the cross-functional team coordinator for the Division of Specialized Support Services. She will present on the homeschool model.
Thank you. And as the least restrictive environment, I'm going to go further into what homeschool model is. Next slide. The homeschool model provides special education services within all MCPS schools. So no matter what school your student attends, there is a homeschool model where we can provide special education services as needed. So here the goal is for students to access the general education curriculum. And this is where Ms. Langston talked a lot about just the tier 1 instruction and that inclusion model, and where we may have co-teaching practices occur. So with the homeschool model, students are usually receiving services in the areas of reading, math, writing, the executive functioning, where we're talking about the organization. We do have aspects of behavioral needs where we may focus on peer interaction, social skills, as well as self-management. And then furthermore, for the homeschool model, most students who are receiving services in this capacity, they have a specific learning disability, there may be an emotional disability, other health impairment, which may include ADHD. And we also have students who have speech language impairments, as well as students with the autism spectrum disorder. Next slide. All right, so with this, for the homeschool model and how the services and supports are provided. So in this model, students are usually working alongside students who do not have disabilities or have IEPs. So here we want students to benefit from working with their non-disabled peers. And if we look at the continuum of services again, we want to look at how students are accessing in that general education classroom. And this may look different. They may receive services within the classroom, so we call that like push-in supports, or they may receive services in a pull-out situation. So we have students who have IEP needs, but they may not need supports. So in that aspect, they could receive their services in a general education classroom without supports. And then we have students who are in a general education classroom who may need supports. They need the implementation of those SDIs and accommodations in a general education classroom. And that's where we want to build the capacity around the co-teaching model. And then we also have students who may need a pull-out service. So these are students who may need that targeted intervention to focus on a specific skill, whether it's reading, writing, or mathematics. Or we also have students who need that social support as well. And then we have classes where it may be a self-contained situation where students are still accessing the general education curriculum, but just in a different capacity. So again, we want to focus on the continuum of services where students are accessing grade level curriculum, because we want to make sure that they're all having opportunities to engage with Tier 1 instruction. I'll keep going. So even for this, overall, when we're looking at the homeschool model, we just want to remember this is a collaborative effort. It is an IEP team. So this is where we have the special education teachers, we have the gen ed teachers, the related service providers, even the paraprofessionals are all working really hard together to make sure that services are implemented with fidelity. Next slide. Oops, thank you. So again, we talked about those supplementary aids. We talked about the specially designed instruction. You'll hear a lot of people saying SDIs. That's a specially designed instruction that is customized to the student's unique needs. So while students may all benefit in a classroom from a particular strategy or accommodation, the SDI is specifically for that student. And this is where we actually have that differentiation, and we're making sure we're paying attention, close attention, targeted attention to what that student actually needs. And homeschool model, we also make sure that students get their related services. So although we have we also make sure that they're getting the speech language support that they would need, as well as OT and PT, and even a new technology is another aspect where students need to they need that service or support to make sure that they are successful and that they want to pay attention to the tech technology as well as the high tech technology. I don't need to read every single example, or we also permit a home model.
I'm
so
sorry,
overall,
Dr.
with
Williams,
everything,
Dr. Williams,
the homeschool model is not old at all. So I'm here
sorry,
to
I
make
think
sure that it's clear.
we're having a mic problem.
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you've been kind of going off and on for a couple
Am I
minutes.
going in and out?
Yeah. But I think you're good now, but I wanted to stop you and
let me see. Yeah. Can you hear me right now? Can you hear my complete sentence, or is it still choppy?
It's a little
It's choppy.
Yeah. Why don't you, this is I think you're wrapping up, right?
All right, let me try to check let me try this to see if this works. Better?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and let's see.
Is this better?
Yes.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Is this better? All right, my apologies. I'm not sure as far as when I started getting choppy.
Maybe you could start at the
So the last
top,
thing I'll,
this.
of this slide. All right, so let me try to summarize even the prior. So I just wanted to make sure, so with the homeschool model, just that the collaboration piece. So this is an IEP team, so it's not just a special education teacher providing those services. So we have the special ed teachers as well as the general education teachers. We have paraprofessionals in the homeschool model as well as the related service providers. They're all working together. They're continuously collaborating to make sure that every single student's needs are being met. Okay, so on this slide with the supplementary aids and the accommodations, this is where we customize to the student's unique needs. So this is where all of those people I just mentioned, they're working together to make sure the student is getting all of these supports, because our goal is to make sure the students are accessing that general education curriculum. And even when it's around students who, if we have social needs, we want to make sure that they're also having the opportunity to work with students who are non-disabled peers. So I'm not sure where I was in time. So overall with the homeschool model, just keep in mind that it's not a one size fit all. So how this model looks in one school location, it may look different in another, because every school building needs to take into account every single student's needs in that issue. But I do want to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Robin Daisy, an instructional specialist for autism services.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So yes, again, I'm Robin Daisy. I'm an instructional specialist. I support elementary autism connections, as well as other services for kindergarten through 12th grade in MCPS. If we can go to the next slide, I'll give kind of an overview of connection services and talk a little bit about the types of students who might be served in autism connection services, and then talk a little bit about how those services are delivered. So many autistic students, as Dr. Williams was explaining, can be effectively served in their home schools, in their neighborhood schools, in a homeschool model, with those less intensive services. So Autism Connections is designed to meet the needs of those students who have not been successful in homeschool model services despite intervention and specialized instruction. Students in Autism Connection services are typically on or above grade level, and they typically have strong language skills that also support their high academic performance. In particular, students typically have significant strengths in reading comprehension and vocabulary, and they often have particular areas of academic interest that also support their learning. Students in Autism Connections are often motivated to perform well academically, but challenges with task initiation, organization, cognitive rigidity, as well as social interaction skills often impact their performance in the curriculum. Although the students have strong language skills, they may have difficulty although the students have strong verbal language skills, so their ability to communicate verbally is typically very strong, they may have difficulty with written language production. They often have good ideas, but have difficulty pulling information together to begin and complete their written work. Socially, the students are often motivated to engage with their peers, but they tend to encounter challenges due to needs in social interaction skills. You can go ahead to the next slide. So because of those needs that I've described, the students in Autism Connections typically require instruction in a special education class for part of, but not all of their school day. So instruction in the small group in the special education class is provided for just under half of the school day. Students in Elementary Connections typically receive their English language arts and social skills instruction in the self-contained class outside of general education. So it's taught by a special education teacher, and the other students in the class are also special education students in Autism Connection services. If students don't need some part of that time, they are able to move into general education for either part or all of the English language arts block. But many of the students continue to need those supports of the self-contained classes for the ELA and social skills. For the other parts of the day, students participate in general education for math, science, and social studies with the support of either a special education teacher or a special education paraeducator. Depending on the student's age and grade level and specific needs, they may have some additional support in specials, lunch and recess. It varies from someone there with them most of the time to check and support to students who are really able to navigate those environments independently. While the Connections classroom sometimes and really often supports students from multiple grade levels within the self-contained classroom, instruction provided is based on the student's grade level. So for example, if 4th and 5th grade students have the same homeroom teacher and they're combined in one classroom, they may be getting their social skills together, social skills instruction together as a fourth and 5th grade group. But when they are getting the ELA instruction, the English Language Arts instruction, the 4th graders are receiving the 4th grade English Language Arts curriculum and the 5th graders are receiving the 5th grade curriculum. The other piece during that time, again, the social skills instruction is typically multi-grade level. The whole homeroom gets social skills together, unless there are some compelling reasons with their schedule that they're not able to do that. But that is taught daily within the special education classroom. And then those skills are reinforced throughout the day across the other settings. Many of the students often also have related executive functioning needs, and those are supported throughout the day rather than targeted through direct instruction. At this time, Elementary Autism Connections is at 2 elementary schools, serving 1st through 5th grade. As students age into middle and high school, we do have services currently for middle school and high school. And the 2 sites are currently Diamond Elementary in Gaithersburg and College Gardens in Rockville. All right, and then I am going to pass it off to my colleague, Lisa Corti, who is an instructional specialist as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Corti. I'm an instructional specialist with Social Emotional Special Education Services. If you could start, yeah, thanks. The students we serve, their major obstacle to accessing the grade level curriculum is social, emotional, or behavioral in nature. Our students tend to require individualized supports in regulation, frustration tolerance, having coping skills. Sometimes it's tolerating frustration, collaborating with peers, or conflict resolution. Some of our students may also require some additional supports in reading, math, or writing. But in general, like I said, our students' major obstacle to accessing the school day is that behavioral piece, which means that we serve students across disability areas and throughout the school day. Next slide, please. Our services are able to provide self-contained classes in the core areas of academics because we are located within comprehensive school buildings. Students are needing to be able to access with adult support transitions throughout the school day and opportunities in their specials such as art and music, and also lunch and recess with adult support. We do have a specialized service provider of a licensed clinical social worker who supports our services. That is not to provide therapy, but because our services work with students who have emotional needs or behavioral needs, our families tend to have also outside service providers, and having the support of a licensed clinical social worker really helps communicate student needs and seam in those problem solving techniques that might be effective in other circumstances or other supports that the student receives, and it can inform practice at school as well. We also have a dedicated behavioral support teacher who supports our services to help navigate and manage the school day. That's the person who can oversee our staff and provide supports in the social emotional needs of our students. Typically, that looks like insight-based problem solving. Our goal with our students is as problems or issues come up throughout the day, that students have an opportunity to work with staff to solve and resolve those issues and return to their academic day and learning as quickly as possible. Our services are located in 8 elementary schools around the county, and access to those certain sites and programs is based on geographical area. I'm now going to turn it over to Tony Spangler to give a little bit more information about school-based learning centers.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everyone. As Lisa said, my name is Tony Spangler. I'm a special education coordinator, and I'm serving with the cross-functional teams. For the next few minutes, I'm going to provide you with an overview of school-based learning centers. My goal is to provide you with a clear outline of these services, which are designed to support students with global academic needs and delays in social development. We'll be covering a typical student profile, a broad description of the services provided, and examples of specific supports available to these students. Thanks for advancing the next slide. School-based learning centers provide specialized instruction and supports for students with significant academic and developmental needs. As the slide indicates, the students served in these centers have complex needs that significantly impact their access to the general education curriculum. These needs include academic delays and social developmental needs. Students typically exhibit global academic needs and are generally 2 to 3 years below grade level in their academic areas. They also often experience delays in social development. Students in school-based learning centers may have a variety of disabilities, including learning disabilities, emotional disabilities, ADHD, speech and language impairments, and autism spectrum disorder. Finally, school-based learning centers recognize the diversity of our students' strengths and needs and embrace and teach the benefits of neurodiversity. Next slide. When looking at the curriculum, students in the school-based learning centers are working towards the general education curriculum standards aligned to their assigned grade level. However, the instruction in these centers involves significant modification and adaptations to the curriculum to meet their needs. The services are specifically designed to address the goals and objectives outlined in your student's IEP. Typically, learning center students possess the adaptive skills that allow them to access a comprehensive school setting, which means the primary focus of this service can be on academic achievement. Next slide. School-based learning centers provide regionally based services for students in kindergarten through grade 5. MCPS currently has 13 school-based learning centers across the county that are located within a comprehensive elementary school setting. Learning centers provide specialized and scaffolded instruction in the core academic areas. The core instruction is provided in a self-contained classroom environment by a special education teacher who is supported by paraeducators. For this year, our goal is to serve approximately 12 students with 1 teacher and 1 paraeducator, although this does vary across the county. Learning centers also are supported by a coordinator. We also provide opportunities for inclusion for non-disabled peers. All students are included in lunch and recess with support, and inclusion in other areas such as art, music, PE, and even academic areas is determined on a case-by-case basis as appropriate for the student. Next slide. This slide details some of the most common services and supports we provide, which include a wide range of academic, behavioral, and organizational strategies. School-based learning center instruction is based around small group and/or individualized support as needed. Academic and organizational supports include differentiated instruction, providing additional time and chunking assignments. We provide low-tech assistive technology such as pencil grips, bumper paper, graphic organizers. We also provide high-tech assistive technology such as voice output devices, text-to-speech readers, and word processors for students that require them. Behavioral and communication supports include supplementary aids and services and accommodations to support communication, executive functioning, and behavior challenges. These can include visual supports, augmentative and alternative communication tools, visual schedules and timers, structured templates such as sentence frames and starters, and teaching organizational skills. Learning center staff view behavior as communication and address difficulties as a skill deficit. We use proactive and antecedent strategies like clear expectations and a high ratio of praise to correction, and advance warning for transitions. When a behavior serves a function, like avoiding a task, we teach an appropriate replacement behavior, like asking for a break. We use a wide variety of visual aids paired with auditory directions, such as first-then charts, checklists, schedules, and social stories. When additional behavior support is needed, IEP teams utilize a collaborative problem-solving approach and work with families on solutions. These solutions may include a functional behavioral assessment to determine the cause of a specific behavior and a behavior intervention plan and goals to teach more appropriate replacement behaviors. The ultimate goal of all of these comprehensive supports is to cultivate a classroom community built on safety, responsibility, and mutual care. We strive to foster an environment where students feel welcome and are given opportunities to set and meet their goals. Next slide. I'm going to turn the next portion over to Kristen Erickson. She's our supervisor for autism services.
Good evening. Thank you, Tony. This evening, I am subbing in for Ms. Elizabeth Lecoussier, who is the principal of Carl Sandburg Learning Center, but she was unable to be with us tonight. As the special education supervisor supporting Sandburg, I am often in the building and I will do my best to all the aspects of Carl Sandburg, but I know I won't do the same justice that she might. Carl Sandburg is an interesting school for us. It's our public separate special education day school that is located in Rockville and serves our entire district. An interesting fact about Carl Sandburg is that our classic autism services actually began within Carl Sandburg Learning Center before moving out into the comprehensive schools. Carl Sandburg has moved recently into a beautiful new building that is co-located with Maryvale Elementary School. We'll talk a little more about it shortly, but that co-location has given us the opportunity to provide some inclusion opportunities for our students as appropriate. Carl Sandburg itself is, again, a separate special education day school, which is primarily fully self-contained. It serves today 58 students in grades K through 5. The majority of the students begin at Carl Sandburg in the first grade. About 80% of the students who are attending Carl Sandburg have a primary autism diagnosis. Others have diagnoses including emotional disabilities, learning disabilities, and significant cognitive disabilities. Regardless of the reason that they're attending Carl Sandburg
Chris,
and some special.
Chris, we're losing you. Do you want to try turning off your video to finish up? That may help with your Wi-Fi.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Where did you lose me, or where did I lose you?
Let's see. I think that you were
Had a broad
I
range of
think I would,
disabilities.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Dana. So I believe I'd said that about 80% of our students have a primary autism diagnosis, but others have a diagnosis that may include an emotional disability, learning disability, and/or a significant cognitive disability. Regardless of a diagnosis, our students are attending Carl Sandburg because they need a very small, controlled, self-contained environment that has a very high staff to student ratio and some of the individual features and characteristics that we'll talk about next. Our students have not been able to thrive in the variety of other services that you've heard discussed earlier and you'll hear discussed later, but are able to be supported in a public setting with the following features. We have an interesting mix at Carl Sandburg in that Sandburg is serving both students who are diploma bound and receiving instruction with appropriate scaffolds and supports at their grade level, and students who are pursuing alternate learning outcomes. There are currently 11 classrooms at Carl Sandburg, and the class size typically ranges from 5 to 8, depending on the age of the students, their primary instructional needs, and an appropriate social emotional grouping. They are then further divided by academic outcome. There are typically 2 paraeducators in each class with a teacher, and students receive specific interventions in the areas of reading and math instruction and instruction related to organization, social skills, pro-social behavior, and in some cases, emotional regulation. Someone had asked earlier in the chat about strategies that are used to support behavior for students, specifically autistic students. And at Carl Sandburg, you will see specific positive reinforcement strategies that are tailored to individual students, as well as instruction in the zones of regulation and other commercially available interventions that are designed to support students learning an independent ability to regulate themselves. We also at Carl Sandburg have individual counseling available to students. We have group counseling from a social worker, and the social worker also brings some of those supports and strategies into classrooms and into parent activity. The elementary level, Carl Sandburg, pardon me, I lost my place a moment. One of the things I wanted to address this evening is that the name implies that Carl Sandburg Learning Center is similar to other learning centers in MCPS. This is a bit of a misconception when you contrast what we've talked about in terms of who Carl Sandburg supports and what Mr. Spangler talked about in terms of what is available in the school-based learning center. We wanted to take the opportunity tonight to clear up a little bit of that confusion. Next slide, please. In addition to what we've already discussed in terms of a separate public day school that serves students with IEPs in grades K to 5 in self-contained classrooms, we also have self-contained specialists from a dedicated art, music, PE, and media teacher. Those specialists often work in other special education settings if they're not full-time at Carl Sandburg. So they do bring a great wealth of experience and expertise in adapting the curriculum for our students. Lunch and recess are opportunities where we have accessed Maryvale Elementary School to provide inclusive opportunities, but they can and are primarily self-contained. We wanted to remind our families that 100% of service hours for a student in Carl Sandburg are outside of general education. Those hours are supported by, in addition to teachers, paraeducators, a principal, an on-site social worker, a behavior support teacher, and a psychologist. All of these positions are full-time on-site. We also have physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy that's provided both on-site and in some cases virtually. And our students may benefit from itinerant services from services like our Deaf and Hard of Hearing department. The space in Carl Sandburg is really specifically designed to support sensory and behavioral needs of our students. There is a beautiful sensory room. There are many calm down rooms that students self-refer to and may access at their will. There are very carefully designed access to a media center and to a lunchroom. There's a beautiful courtyard for our students who are not happy or able to access the playground. There are many wonderful features of Carl Sandburg, but I want to remind everyone the goal is always to move students to a less restrictive environment when possible. Last school year, we were able to send 8 students to less restrictive settings, and we hope to mirror that outcome in this coming school year. For a frame of reference, for those of you who are familiar with these services or participated Tuesday night in our session, students articulating to 6th grade from Carl Sandburg have gone to Autism Resource Services, Learning for Independence, the Rock Terrace School, a social and emotional support services, and to non-public settings if our students continue to need that very highly individualized support. At this time, it appears that we are ready to transition back to our first Q&A session, and I apologize for my internet instability.
Thank you, Chris. So for tonight, our facilitator is xMinds Board President Sue Keisler. We have lots of questions already in the chat, and Sue will read those out loud.
Okay, so we have some questions that are specifically for one of the programs that you've just been discussing, and then we have some more general questions. I'm going to start with the ones that are specific to a program. So we had some questions about the homeschool model. So maybe LaTanya Williams will address these. First one is, how is MCPS supporting interventions for math and reading at their homeschool?
Hi, good question. All right, so this will look, first of all, can you guys hear me? Let me do a sound check. Okay, so the interventions will look different and it depends on what the students need. So is it an intervention where it is a supplemental aspect to the grade level curriculum? That's something that can be provided in the classroom setting or with that math block or that reading block. But there's also opportunities for students if they need a more research-based intervention, more targeted. There is a pull-out method where the special education teacher would pull that student out to provide that intervention. As far as the minutes and the frequency per week, that's up to the IEP team. So again, that will look different across the board, but each school has research-based programs to provide that targeted instruction, whether it's in reading or the mathematics.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Another question for homeschool model. What are the behavior interventions available for kids on the spectrum? That's a big question.
So again, we want to make sure we're taking a positive approach, and each student has their own unique needs. So I could generalize. I'm not sure if there's a specific question for a specific student that we can address, to the side or offline, but it's very important that we take that positive approach. And we do have situations where if it's a student if we're focusing on like a replacement behavior, we do have the option to explore that further with like an FBA to develop that behavior intervention plan for that student. But again, each student may have a slew of specially designed instruction. So when we think of accommodations, just know that those are not just for academics. If there's a customized need for a student who may need frequent breaks, who may need to be exposed to maybe a text beforehand, like anything that we can get ahead of to be preventative for that specific behavior. We just want to make sure that that is a special consideration for that specific student.
Okay. And just to clarify, FBA, do you want to define that?
I try to, staying clear. So an FBA is a functional behavior assessment if it got to the point that we need that. So that's where school teams are looking at, is there a function of the behavior? Do we need to identify replacement behavior? And then they determine whether or not a behavior intervention plan is needed.
Okay, thanks. Another question about homeschool model. Is it possible to do mid-year transfers in the case where a student is not adapting to the homeschool?
Great question. So anytime, even though we have annual reviews for students, we always can have interim IEP meetings or periodic IEP meetings. So if there's any concern from the family's lens or the school team, just make sure that we're scheduling an IEP meeting to address the students' lack of progress. So usually you may see that around the quarterly progress reporting. So if there's any concern, definitely reach out to the school team to get an IEP meeting scheduled.
And let's see. Okay, another one for the homeschool model. How is MCPS supporting ASD behavioral needs in the home? Well, I think we just covered that, actually. Okay, here's a question about Carl Sandburg. Is it possible to visit Carl Sandburg?
It is possible to visit Carl Sandburg Learning Center. Parents whose kids are being referred there will be toured at the school. You can meet the team, you can observe the classrooms, you can see specials in progress throughout the year periodically, but not on on a calendar basis that I could share with you. We do offer tours and tour days at most of our services. That is an individual thing though, and we would urge your child is being considered for placement.
Okay, you cut out there for just a second. Can you just repeat that last sentence?
I was just urging families to be in touch with people at schools through their cross-functional team or supervisor if a placement is being considered for their child.
Great. Okay, thanks. Okay, here's another question. When a child is transitioning from PEP or CAP, and those are the preschool programs, to kindergarten, how is it determined which one of these programs would be the best fit and the least restrictive setting, and what is involved in this process?
I can take that one. As we talked about in a number of other cases, these are IEP team decisions. And so there's a number of factors that kind of play a role with teams as they're reviewing a child's needs. We kind of provided a broad overview of each of these programs so far. The factors that teams are considering are the kinds of support the child requires in terms of instruction, supplementary aids, and services. So all of those pieces kind of play a role. So when determining which of these programs, we always want to go to the least restrictive environment as identified by the IEP. And so this is really critical in terms of parent involvement with the IEP. We want to make sure that the IEP is reflecting all of your child's needs. And so you would want to work with your preschool program to be sure that that IEP is a reflection of their needs in terms of both classroom and other environments as well.
That's a nice overall explanation. And we have another question having to do with the transition. I was hoping you could speak a bit more of the key differences, aside from the age of the child, between the CAP preschool program and the classic autism program.
Sue, I can try to respond to that. I want to make sure that I heard it properly and that you can hear me. Were we asking about the difference between CAP and classic autism?
Yes, but I'm realizing maybe we should wait till the second Q&A after you've had a chance to talk about classic autism. Would that
Yes,
be?
but that's a very easy answer. CAP
Okay.
is a preschool service for our youngest learners, ages 3 to turning 5. Classic autism services really begin with kindergarten.
We'll get to it later, but the person that's asking has said, aside from the age difference, they wanted to know sort of what the other changes are. But we'll do it after you've had a chance to talk about the classic autism program, I think.
Okay.
So sorry, I shouldn't have brought that one up. Okay, we have a couple of questions about location. Parents wondering about what happens if their child's homeschool doesn't have the special education program that their child needs. Do they need to request a change of school assignment or move their residence or what? So there's some, people need to understand how that's handled. And since not every elementary school has one of the special education programs of every kind that are being discussed tonight, it's obviously a very common situation. So Chris, maybe you could explain how this is handled.
Understandable question. We make every effort to serve your child in their neighborhood school, but should we agree with you as part of an IEP process that your child's needs can't be met in the neighborhood school, it's our obligation as a school system to provide transportation to the nearest site that has the services that could meet your child's needs. So if your child would attend, let's say Maryvale Elementary School in general education, and needs services that are offered at College Gardens, Montgomery County provides curb-to-curb transportation for your child to their school that's designated through the IEP process. It is not incumbent on families to have to request a COSA or anything like that.
Okay. Related question. If the child is in the homeschool model, what options are available if the home address does not fall within the school district that the parents believe is the best fit for their child? Are there alternatives that they can explore, particularly with school district boundaries changing in the future? Is is a change of school assignment possible? And would that be something that they would have to apply for each year?
Parents would have to apply for a change of school assignment. There are individual considerations around whether or not the change of school assignment will be granted. It's not a guarantee. If the change of school assignment is granted, it is granted without transportation. So
Okay.
it will be the family responsibility to provide transportation.
Okay. Here's a question about the variation in elementary schools. It says, I want to understand more about how each MCPS elementary school offers different resources. And they may be asking about different programs, or maybe the same program in different places will look somewhat different, if you can address those variations.
So I think Dr. Williams did give a broad overview of that to say that every elementary school in Montgomery County is different. The culture is different. The focus is different. The dynamics are different. And an IEP, while the services designated on the IEP will be met regardless of what school the child attends, it may look different. It may have a different schedule, and it may be implemented in accordance with the variation in each school at every elementary school. There is no one set model that says homeschool model will look exactly like this. I know that's hard to think about, but we have a huge district, and each school has its own flair and its own way of making sure that your child's IEP is addressed. I think that we would all urge that if your child is receiving an IEP and homeschool model, you spend that time talking to the team and asking how it will be implemented. What will the schedule look like?
Okay, thanks. It looks like we have a lot of questions about the FBA now that we've defined what an FBA is. So question about how do we get an FBA established? We have an FBA in place, but the team is not trained in behavioral intervention. Is there anything the parents can do? The problem is elopement. So if someone could address FBAs and discuss those questions. Also, one more is the special education teacher the assigned individual for the student FBA? Sure thing.
Chris, you got it, or you can go ahead.
Sure. I don't want to shut down an important conversation, but the development of the FBA and a BIP, if indicated, is a whole evening's presentation. I'm trying to look to see what is the primary overarching question here.
Maybe how it gets established. What's the process? What kind of data is collected? How long is that time period that it's collected? Just how does it get initiated?
So very generally, certainly a family, I think I saw a question in here about a family feeling their child needs an FBA and perhaps BIP. Either the family can approach the IEP team to say, I understand that Robin is having challenging behavior that's removing her from instruction. I'd like for us to meet to consider an FBA. Conversely, the IEP team can call an IEP meeting and request authorization, which the family has to provide, to conduct an FBA. Very simply, when we do an FBA, we identify what the behavioral barrier is, whether it's not wanting to engage in schoolwork, whether it's elopement, which is a common issue we know with our students. The team, parents included, decides on a definition of that behavior, the general types of data that will be collected, and then we have a period of time where those data are collected. That can include rating scales, that can include direct observational data. The time frame can vary, but the thing that parents, I think, most need to know is that the school team is and will be accountable to the family for sharing those data. We may ask the parents to contribute to the data at times as well, and coming together to talk about whether or not the data indicate that it's necessary to create a behavior intervention plan. But it is a complex process, and I think it does deserve a whole night or at least half of a night. If colleagues have something that they want to chime in and share that might clarify.
Yeah, the only other thing, I was looking at the questions, Chris, as you were sharing that. Thank you for the overview. There was another question, a couple that were asking the kinds of behaviors that would be addressed. And the piece that I really want to just highlight here is that any behavior that prevents your child from accessing learning has to be addressed. So one of the questions was about school refusal, and that would fall within those kinds of behaviors. So if you do have a child, once they're identified as having a disability, then the school system really is obliged to address the behaviors that are preventing them from accessing instruction.
Thanks okay, both of you, thanks. Okay, I want to get to another question that was, there are a couple of questions about gifted and talented learning disabled kids, so twice exceptional students. And people may not realize that that's not administered by the Special Education Division. Maybe one of you could, though, say where that is offered and how that's handled.
Robin, I'm going to pick on you.
Sure. So students who are twice exceptional are served probably in several of the services that we've talked about tonight. I would say we certainly have students in Autism Connections who are twice exceptional. Homeschool model services would certainly have students who are twice exceptional, as would social emotional special education services. Would be far less likely in the elementary learning centers or Carl Sandburg. There is also a specific special education service that is not represented here tonight, but is called Twice Exceptional Services. It begins at 3rd grade and is at one elementary school and several middle and high schools. I can't speak to all the differences of the Twice Exceptional Services. It is a central IEP team referral. So if an elementary team for a 3rd, 4th, or a rising 3rd, 4th, or 5th grader, or a current 3rd, 4th, and 5th grader is considering that service and feels that the student's unique needs need to be addressed for the twice exceptionality as the primary need, then they would refer to the central IEP team. In terms of access to enriched instruction, any of the services we've talked about can provide access to accelerated and enriched instruction through the ELA curriculum as students get into the upper grades, through the math curriculum in the upper grades, and those would really be the same across any of those services.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I just want to give everyone a heads up that it's 10 after 8. And we could take a question, or we could wait until the end after the other presentations.
Yeah, we can go back to the presentation. There will be another Q&A and we will address the remaining questions. And actually, I just wanted to mention that if there are any questions we don't address tonight, we will put them in the bin, and these presenters will get back to the person that asked the question. We will get those answers to you, so you don't have to worry.
Great, thank you. So next, I want to introduce you to instructional specialist Mrs. Taylor Hartman and Ms. Lauren Ashley Miner. They will be discussing alternate learning outcome services.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name is Taylor Hartman. I'm an instructional specialist on our ALO team, as is my colleague Lauren Ashley Miner. We're going to talk a little bit about the alternate learning outcome services in tandem with classic autism. We can go to the next slide. Alternate learning outcomes, or ALO services, are designed for a very small number of students with significant learning needs who benefit from instruction that is more individualized, hands-on, and supportive. Even though instruction looks different, it is still aligned to the Maryland College and Career Ready standards. Students are learning the same big ideas as their peers, but the content is adjusted to match their learning profile. This does not mean students follow a separate curriculum. Instead, the standards are modified so that students can access them successfully. For example, while a student While a grade level standard may require analyzing cause and effect, a student receiving ALO instruction might focus on identifying key details or sequencing events using visuals and structured supports. Eligibility for ALO is determined during the IEP team process using a formal checklist to ensure these services are only provided when they are truly the best match for the student. This form is called Appendix A. Families are essential partners throughout the process, and your input and consent are both required before a child participates. Teachers use strategies such as visuals, repetition, modeling, small group instruction, and real-world connections so that every student is able to demonstrate what they know in a meaningful and unique way. Ultimately, the goal of ALO instruction is to help students make steady, measurable progress, build confidence, and access learning in ways that honor their strengths and support their needs. We can go to the next slide. All right, so when a child is working on alternate achievement standards, what does that look like? Students who participate in the alternate learning outcomes are still learning grade level topics. They are not given a different curriculum. Instead, the learning expectations are adjusted to match how they learn best and how they demonstrate that learning best. For example, this grade 3 standard, every third grader studies units about topics like government and how communities work. Students on alternate learning outcomes learn those same big ideas, but in ways that are more accessible for them. This chart shows how a typical grade 3 standard gets simplified. So in the regular standard, students might be asked to answer detailed questions about a text or explain the main idea. In the alternate version, students might focus on questions like who is the story about or what happened. Instead of explaining a whole sequence of events, they might simply tell us what happened first and what happened next. The content stays the same, but the expectations are tailored so that the child can fully participate and show what they know. These adjustments help ensure that students with significant learning needs are still part of the same curriculum and grade level themes. They get to experience the same rich content as their peers, but in a way that fits their learning strengths and needs. Students don't participate in alternate learning outcomes just by default. The IEP team makes this decision very carefully every year, using a specific tool and considering multiple factors. And families must give written permission before the child participates. Alternate achievement standards help us give students meaningful access to grade level learning. They allow students to build skills and make progress just in a way that's designed for how they learn. The next couple slides, we're going to go through our individual service models, including LFI, SEB, Classic Autism, and then extension services. Next slide. I'm going to pass to my colleague, Lauren.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to join you today. So I'm here to talk about Learning for Independent services, and we're going to talk about school community-based services. So Learning for Independent services are a set of specialized services that are designed to support students with mild to moderate intellectual disabilities and/or autism. These services help children grow academically, build communication skills, and also develop everyday life skills that they need to become more independent at school, at home, and in the community. Students receiving LFI or Learning for Independent services are also working toward alternate learning outcomes. And these are adapted versions, again, like Taylor said, of grade level standards that allow students to learn at a pace and level that match their strengths and needs. So while academics are an important part of the LFI or Learning for Independence experience, their services are also place a strong focus on adaptive skills such as following routines, interacting with peers, expressing their wants and needs, and practicing real life tasks. One of the main approaches used in Learning for Independent services is a teaching method called I do, we do, you do. And this means that the teacher first shows students how a skill works, and then they practice it with them. And then finally, it gives the student an opportunity, a chance to demonstrate it independently on their own. So this approach really helps students to feel supported, confident, and ready to take small steps toward greater independence. Learning in this setting happens in small groups with a teacher and paraeducator working closely with students. And this allows each child to receive more attention, more practice, and instruction that fits their needs. Learning for Independent Services address both academic areas like reading and math, and also functional life skills such as communication, organization, social interaction, and problem solving. Students may also spend time with their general education peers during specials like art, music, or physical education, lunch, and recess. And these inclusion opportunities help students to build friendships, practice social skills, and also feel connected to their school community. Additional opportunities to join activities, our general education activities, are decided by the IEP team and based on what is best for each child. For the 2025-26 school year, Learning for Independent Services are designed to support about 10 to 12 students on average, with one special education teacher and one paraeducator. The exact number of students and staff may vary from school to school, depending on school needs and classroom needs, but LFI services are not offered in every single elementary school. These decisions, again, like Taylor said, are carefully made by the IEP team to make sure that services and supports best meet each individual's needs. So overall, LFI services, or Learning for Independent Services, are built to help students grow academically, become more independent, and feel confident in a variety of settings. We can go to the next slide. I'm going to now talk about our school community-based services. And these services are provided to students with more significant intellectual disabilities and or autism who benefit from smaller class sizes, individualized instruction, and a highly structured learning environment. Services are designed to help students develop academic, social, and functional skills that they need to participate meaningfully in both their school settings and in the community setting as well. School community-based, or SCB classrooms typically serve 6 to 8 students and are staffed by one special education teacher and 2 paraeducators or classroom assistants. And this staffing model ensures that students are receiving frequent support, individualized attention throughout the day, and the team is working closely to create consistent routines, provide clear expectations, and offer the level of support each student needs to learn and grow in that environment. For the 2025-2026 school year, the goal is to maintain those ratios across our school community-based services, although class sizes and staffing may vary based on the school needs, classroom needs. Instruction in school community-based classrooms focuses also on academics, communication, social skills, and real life learning experiences. So students practice skills such as cooking, using money, following schedules, and navigating different areas of the school. And these hands-on learning experiences help our students in these services to build greater levels of independence and also confidence. Students in school community-based services also participate in inclusion opportunities such as music, art, physical education, and supports are put in place to help students engage successfully and enjoy meaningful interactions with their peers. And these services, again, overall provide a supportive, individualized learning environment where students can develop the skills and independence that they need to thrive, again, in both their school and in their community setting. And we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it on to my colleague to talk about autism services.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Austin Clagis. I'm a program specialist who supports autism services, and I'm accompanied by my colleague, Dana Gillespie, who is also a program specialist with autism services. We will be discussing over the next few slides supporting in classic autism services. We are supportive of over 400 students across 25 schools, comprehensive elementary schools, and we have 16 classrooms at the elementary level. Next slide, please. So although most students in autism services may have a diagnosis of autism, diagnosis does not drive placement. And that's a common misconception that all students with autism diagnosis are served within autism services. We autism unit people love numbers and statistics. So just to share that the number of students with autism in MCPS is about 5,610, and the number of students in autism services is about 1,019. So that's approximately about 18% of students with autism supported in autism services. Students best served in classic autism services have significant needs in the areas of adaptive skills, behavior, communication, and social skills. Examples of adaptive behavior can be, those functional life skills like toileting, hand washing, managing their daily tasks, as well as independence. Behaviors are a lack of communication and can vary from student to student. Some of the interfering behaviors that we observe and support in our classrooms might be things like interfering behaviors, which sometimes presents in harming themselves, also called self-injurious behaviors. Sometimes we see body dropping, elopement, or running and wandering away, and those highly physical behaviors, including scratching, biting, hitting, and so on. We really emphasize teaching replacement behaviors so students are able to advocate for their needs, communicate effectively, and of course, learn new skills. Students served in our services often have varying language abilities, so some students may be described as non-speaking or have limited vocal speech. Some students have echolalia, where they'll repeat words back or phrases. Some students utilize AAC devices or those verbal output systems. Some students use pictures and gestures, and some may be vocal language users. Within those communication needs, we support students to help them gain language, and communication skills are often utilized in multiple ways. Staff and our paraeducators provide continuous modeling and reinforcement so that students learn how to communicate and interact with each other. Additionally, many students served are not able to interpret those social cues, often needing those social skills training on how to appropriately interact with others. Additionally, students in our services access the curriculum with significant modifications. They will be exposed to those core content areas, however, will not access the entirety of the curriculum, and that's driven by their strengths and needs identified on their IEP. And my colleague Taylor Hartman just shared a really nice example of what that might look like. Next slide. Additionally, accessing alternate learning outcomes. All of our students are mostly accessing alternate learning outcomes, and this is a determination and discussion made at the IEP team meeting. So for example, students in first grade may read or be read a first grade level text with multiple repetitions. Modifications may be made to the text to decrease the complexity, like shorter passages with simplified language. They may answer comprehension questions following that exposure to the text, but they may be given fewer choices with picture supports to aid in their comprehension. And all of our instruction is delivered in a very systematic way. So I'll turn it over to Dana to talk more specifically about our instructional model. Next slide.
Thank you, Austin. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to share a bit more about the service features specifically in our Classic Autism program. So we are a self-contained classroom that is run by a special education teacher and includes all students who have IEPs, primarily with that diagnosis of autism or those characteristics of autism. Some of our younger students might have that developmental delay code. For the 25-26 school year, our goal is to serve approximately 6 to 7 students in each classroom with that one special education teacher supported by 2 paraeducators. However, this does vary throughout the county based on different circumstances and different needs. The classrooms offer a really highly structured school day with opportunities for that individualized learning. Really, from the moment a child comes off the bus or they're dropped off by a caregiver, they are met by staff, really for those safety skills and those adaptive learning opportunities. And they need to be supported throughout the entirety of their day. We follow a very structured routine. We use lots of visual supports to guide the students of what is happening across their school day. And a unique feature in our program that's different from other ALO services that we are reviewing tonight is our teaching procedures are based on applied behavior analysis, which is also referred to as ABA. If you are not familiar with ABA, ABA is a type of specialized instruction. It is evidence-based, and it's really with the goal to use reinforcement and systematic learning and repetition and practice to teach new skills, improve social interactions, increase meaningful behaviors, and to decrease any inappropriate behaviors. We also, with our ABA teaching procedures, use a lot of reinforcement for those academic as well as those appropriate school behaviors. We are a reinforcement first program, and we are always emphasizing that we use reinforcement to really drive that motivation and to teach those meaningful skills. Another primary feature under our ABA style of instruction is our use of discrete trial instruction. This is also referred to as DTT or ITT, commonly across classrooms. And really what that means is we break down skills into small discrete steps where we might provide an initial instruction. We then prompt the answer because discrete trial is an errorless way of learning. After that prompt, for them to respond correctly, we then provide that consequence, which is that reinforcement to reinforce that behavior, and we record data. And we do lots of teaching and practice to transfer those errorless skills into more independent skills. So we do lots of teaching trials across the day, and that instruction, we'll talk a little bit more on that next slide, is our intensive teaching time. Next slide. All right, so some additional service features. Our instruction is provided across the day in what we call dyads or triads. And what that means is it's typically either 2 students or 3 students working directly with either the special education teacher or the paraeducator, with the average target of we would like to see this about 3 hours a day. This does vary from school to school depending on special schedules and bus arrival time and dismissal time, but that is our target goal, is for them to be receiving that type of intensive ABA style of instruction 3 hours a day, where they're working on their individualized IEP goals and objectives, which are developed in the context of an IEP team meeting, and that's based on their strengths and needs. And in addition to those IEP goals and objectives, we also work on a lot of language programming to really support those areas of communication that Austin addressed in an earlier slide. So we work on lots of skills like labeling items, requesting, receptive listening skills, conversation skills, to really build up that language repertoire for all of our learners. We also do provide whole group instruction twice a day, and that's typically a whole group math lesson or a whole group reading lesson. And these range from 20 to 30 minutes. And this is where they're getting the curriculum presented to them, but significantly modified to meet their needs. So this would be the whole group of 6 or 7 learners seated at a desk area or a whole group table, getting all of that content from the special education teacher, with typically 1 paraeducator supporting. And this is when we're trying to incorporate some of more of that natural style of instruction that I do, we do, you do, but we're still using all of our ABA principles of reinforcement and all of our other strategies to really drive that behavior change and to motivate that learning during that time. Most students in our program participate in lunch and recess with non-disabled peers, but always with that paraeducator support. So our students are never left alone throughout the day. They really need that adult support from the moment they arrive to the moment they leave. But we do want them to access those other settings and those other peers to work on generalization of skills and give them that social opportunity. We do have students that attend all self-contained specials, so that's art, music, PE, and at some schools, media as well, where they are supported again by our paraeducators, but they are getting that content from that area specialist. So it would be the whole autism classroom transitioning to that specials classroom in that self-contained model. In addition to some of the other skills listed, we do work on that functional communication and self-care and social skills embedded throughout the day. And we also do provide some more specific instruction and provide a lot of support to decrease any of those interfering behaviors we might observe and increase those appropriate behaviors. At most of our schools, we start community-based instruction, which is also known as CBI, and that begins in 3rd grade. And that is when it is an instructional opportunity. The autism classroom goes out with their special education teacher and their 2 paraeducators to access a community outing. Typically, it's about 2 hours a week where they might go to Target or Safeway or the mall, and they are practicing those adaptive behaviors, those safety skills in the community, navigating aisles in the community, practicing their communication, and tying some of that real world experience based on the skills they're learning in the classroom. That is all for Classic Autism. I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Hartman and Ms. Miner for extensions.
Hi again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our extension services. We can go to the next slide. So Extensions provides the most intensive level of support for students with complex learning profiles, including students with autism and significant intellectual disabilities. These services are considered when other service models are not successful because the level of interfering behavior is getting in the way of their learning despite the supports and structures of those other service models. In these classrooms, the teachers blend direct instruction with natural learning opportunities throughout the day. Students work on academics, communication, self-care, and social-emotional skills in a structured, nurturing environment designed to help them feel safe, supported, and successful. Instruction happens in a very small group with high staff-to-student ratio, which allows us to individualize teaching and ensure students stay engaged and regulated. For the 2025 to 2026 school year, our goal is to serve approximately 5 to 8 students with 1 teacher and 3 paraeducators, although this may vary across the county based on student need. Each classroom also includes behavioral and social work support because we know that success at school depends on meeting both academic needs and emotional and behavioral needs. Students participate in real-world learning experiences, things like cooking, navigating the school building, and community outings, so the skills they learn in the classroom can be generalized specifically to carry over into their daily lives. The overarching goal of our extension services is to help every student build independence, communication, and adaptive skills that will support them long after elementary school. Our goal is also to put in place supports and structures that reduce those levels of interfering behavior, and then we systematically fade support so that students are ready to go back to a less restrictive setting. Some students continue to require the supports, longer than others. But that is the overarching goal of extension services. Next slide. I think we have brought it to the Q&A.
Okay, great. So at this point, we can start the Q&A again for certificate-bound students, as well as any leftover questions you may have about diploma-bound.
Okay, so I'd like to address a question about AAC, which is, anyway, here it is. Will you please share information about AAC device supports, that's alternative augmented communication devices, and intensive speech programs for a child with autism?
That's a very large question. I have shared in the chat the link to our Interact department, which is the department, the specialized department supporting augmentative and alternative communication in MCPS. To answer the first question, an augmentative speech device, display, or means of communication can often and will often first be managed by a case manager. Many of our case managers are skilled at using and determining when to use what we call low-tech devices. That could be a picture communication board, it could be a device called a GoTalk, or other devices that can be customized for a student, but can be very general. And does not take particular skill to learn to program and use with a student. When a child's augmentative and alternative communication needs can't be met by their classroom team, we can collaborate with a speech pathologist and we can call in our Interact team. If you'll go to the link that we provided about the Interact team does come and provide consultation, some device assessment and review, and recommendations around using devices that are beyond the traditional devices you might see in a specially designed classroom. In that case, the team will come to an IEP meeting, talk with the family about observations and recommendations, and provide the management and the training to classroom staff and to families around more complex devices.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Now I'd like to get back to the question that I asked earlier, which was a little premature at that point. If you could speak about the differences, the key differences between the CAP preschool program and the classic autism program, aside from the fact that the kids are different ages. Is there a difference in approach?
No, there's not a difference in approach. In the CAP, in our CAP model, we are providing a higher staffing ratio with the recognition that students who come to CAP are those students whose needs cannot be met, even as very tiny learners, in any of our preschool programs. Our students typically in CAP require very intensive individualized instruction to learn basic classroom language, to learn expectations and routines, to start to learn communication. Many of our youngest learners are learning potty training and other very fundamental skills. The goal of the CAP program is to provide a very intensive setting to allow those students to be kindergarten or school ready so that they can move forward and then benefit from some of our other services. So the primary differences are age-related and developmental, as well as the staffing ratio.
Okay, thanks. All right, I want to ask a couple of questions that have come up about the cross-functional teams. Can you explain how the cross-functional teams will address issues within their areas? And what expertise is represented by each cross-functional team? And specifically, will all the teams have at least one member with a background in training in autism?
I could take that one. That's a great question. And I'm just going to provide kind of a broad overview because there's variations between teams. As you might have heard, there's 13 different teams across the county that are serving the schools under each cluster. And within those teams, there is a special education coordinator and an instructional specialist, as well as other members of the team from other disciplines and content areas, curriculum specialists, et cetera. And the purpose of the cross-functional team is really to bring together a group of people with expertise in their respective areas to support the broad spectrum of needs within a school building. So we do that collaboratively. So to address your specific question about autism, the background of each of the specialists within the team varies. Some of them have had direct experience as either teachers or program support staff in autism, and some have not. But this is where the collaborative piece comes to play. We often within those teams have members that have experience. If we need additional support, then we are certainly able to reach out to our colleagues within the autism services team for any specific areas, and there's a process that we do through that. Chris, do you want to add anything?
No, I thought that was a perfect answer. So do you think that answers the question for this evening?
I think so. All right. I mean, someone can raise their hand if they would like more. Okay. We had some timing questions about how long it takes for different things. Okay. One person asks, is it possible to know which school my son will be sent to in advance, or how soon will the decision be made? I'm not sure quite where in the system this child is, but I guess if there's maybe they're in preschool and looking at their kindergarten program. About, I guess, if you can talk about the timing of determining a placement.
If we're talking about a student who's articulating from preschool to elementary school, we begin, the school system begins right now looking at articulation patterns, boundaries, and where services will be located next year. As we're looking at that, the goal is to know generally by March, what an articulation pattern would look like for each program. So if you have a preschool student who will be going to kindergarten next year, while we're doing that work in the background, you will be working with your IEP team to start talking about the services that will be recommended for your child next year. Our goal, although we are not always able to reach it just due to the fact that we can't always anticipate where the biggest enrollment will be in the county and whether or not we will need to adapt articulation patterns based on enrollment. Our goal would be that by the time you have your IEP meeting, and they're typically in the spring, which can run anywhere from March into June, your team will be able to talk with you about the services that may be under consideration. So let's say you have a student who may be considered for a school-based learning center. If that is a consideration, your team is likely to share with you, we'd like you to spend time looking at a school-based learning center, and the school-based learning center for your articulation pattern is Brook Grove Elementary School. The same is likely to happen with any service that a team wants to discuss with you, particularly for the transition from preschool to kindergarten. We want to give you all the information possible. And we'll also ask you likely to look at your neighborhood school so you have an understanding of the requirements of the neighborhood school. But beyond that, it's dependent on us sharing information about articulation.
Okay, thank you. There are a couple more questions about specific timing. So let's say a child is in the homeschool model, it's not working out, they need to transfer to a more specialized program. How long is that likely to take? Knowing I'm sure that there's a range, but some guidelines.
Chris, I can chime in. So for that, it's not a specific timeline. There's a process because we need to make sure that we're making data-driven decisions. So with that, it varies. If there is concern and the student is not successful in that homeschool model, you do want to make sure you guys are having those IEP meetings so that you can address not only how the student is currently performing, but whether or not we need to collect any more information to make that decision, because we always want to stay with that continuum of services with the least restrictive environment just at the forefront. But if that's not successful, we do need to address that in an actual IEP meeting.
Okay. We have two questions that maybe we can combine a little bit. How long does the IEP process usually take? And it sounds like that's like the initial IEP. And are there any programs we can access while the assessment is underway? And related to that, I would say for kids moving from a different county to Montgomery County, what's the process for evaluating and deciding what school the child gets assigned to? So I think both of these sort of ask the question of, during that process that you're sort of evaluating and establishing their IEP, what is there for them in the meantime? if they're coming from a different county or they're already in MCPS?
If they're coming from a different county with an IEP, Montgomery County is required, and all counties are required, to hold an IEP meeting within 10 days to discuss comparable services. When we talk about comparable services, different districts describe services very differently, but it's our job to work with the families to say, it sounds as though the Learning Center or Classic Autism or Extension Services is the service most comparable to what your child received in the district that you just left. That happens very frequently. The other question was more about timing and implementation of an initial IEP, is that correct?
Yeah, and is there, during that period, is there any support that they can get?
It's hard to answer without knowing specifically what the person is asking. But the goal is that when Dr. Williams talked about homeschool model, that's where we typically find students for whom we're developing an initial IEP. Support should be in place. We're looking at pre-referral strategies. We're looking at providing supports from within the existing school, but there's not a specific program that would be provided to any individual child. That would vary depending on the child and their needs.
Okay. Here's a specific question. Of all of the elementary programs, and I think they're referring to the ALO programs, which would provide the smallest setting, like smallest class setting? This is for a child with great adaptive skills, but has a heightened sensory profile with a lot of difficulty handling lots of noise, and they'd be transferring to first grade.
So I think that we heard that the current goal for staffing for this school year is fairly similar if you look across Carl Sandburg Learning Center, school community-based, and autism services. I'm not sure if the person asking the question has a student who is pursuing alternate learning outcomes, but those at the time are the smallest physical classes. However, there are a lot of variables that can play into that. Are we talking about a student who's not able to be in a comprehensive building with all the ebb and flow of our larger classes? That's a definite question that I think speaks to someone who needs to talk specifically to their IEP team.
Okay. This question is, I'm not totally sure. There might be a little confusion in this one. Is there a difference between classic autism being taught at an elementary school versus at a learning center? So
I can try to answer this question. So both our classic autism services as well as our learning centers are both in comprehensive school buildings. The primary difference between both sets of services are a few things. Elementary learning centers, those students are on diploma track. They are getting the full breadth of the curriculum, although they're getting those significant modifications as Mr. Spangler referenced. And the ratio in the classroom is a bit different. Our classic autism services are for those students that are working on the alternate learning outcomes. So they are pursuing a certificate of program completion, and the students in our set of services really require ABA or that discrete trial instruction to learn knowledge. Whereas Learning Center, it's more of that naturalistic type of instruction.
thank you for untangling that. Okay, here's a question that was submitted when they registered. This is someone who says, what are the types of help okay. They have someone in second grade, and they say, if I want to take him out of public school, what are my options for him? So I'm wondering if you could talk about non-public placements that are the result of an IEP team's decision, and as opposed to when a parent decides they want to pull their child out. What are the consequences? How does it differ? And what's the process?
So for Montgomery County Public Schools to refer a student to a non-public placement, there is an IEP process, which essentially determines that we have properly described the student's strengths and needs, developed an IEP with services that are calculated to support their access to the curriculum, and that we have ruled out public settings for that student. So for an elementary student, we should have considered homeschool model. We may have considered school-based learning center or autism or school community-based if it's a student pursuing alternate learning outcomes. And then we may consider Carl Sandburg, which is a separate day school, 100% self-contained. And if it's the determination that the student's needs cannot be met in any of those settings, then the student may receive referrals to non-public schools. There is a different trajectory and responsibility for a parent who decides to withdraw their child from the public schools and enroll them in a non-public setting. That is a situation where families are going to be exercising their rights to due process if the request ultimately is that the school system fund that placement.
Okay, thanks. Here's another question about delaying the start of kindergarten. So if a parent chooses to delay starting kindergarten by a year, and this is a child with a summer birthday, would the child still be eligible to be placed in one of these programs when starting kindergarten at 6 years old? And will they still keep their IEP? And any other consequences of holding them back a year?
Do you want me to answer this question? Okay. If a family chooses to delay entrance to kindergarten prior to the start of their future kindergarten year, that next year when they're 6 years old, the IEP team will reconvene and will gather whatever the data that the family provides and make a decision for kindergarten services. Sorry.
Are you done? Sorry. Okay. I hope you're okay. All right. So here's a question from earlier. What executive functioning curriculum does the district use?
The district uses a variety of executive functioning curricula and supports and strategies. The most prevalent general executive function curricula that we use in autism services, and you'll see in many other settings across the county, is Unstuck and On Target. But there's a whole body of work around executive functioning supports and tools that are individualized to a particular student's needs and abilities.
Okay.
It is 8:56. So Sue, do you
Maybe just
have
one more question?
a quick question? Sure.
What type of training or professional development have classroom teachers had about autism in the homeschool model?
So the degree of training that homeschool model teachers has received will vary. There are multiple opportunities throughout the year, including training that's provided to the lead elementary teacher, to administrators. There are opportunities that are provided by the autism unit. We're coming up in December and January on our offering of Autism 101 and Autism 102, which are designed to support students in general education and are open to everyone. Cross-functional teams may be providing training. There's also some training on autism and neurodiversity coming out of the equity unit. We attempt to provide specific trainings to individual schools at their request. More, we are all leaning towards trying to make sure that any opportunities to access training specific to autism are widely publicized and open to all participants.
That was our last question. There are more questions, but we will make sure that the people who ask those will get their answers. So don't worry. We've saved them all.
All right. Thank you. At this point, I would like to invite everyone in our audience to complete a short 2-question feedback form. And to get to that feedback form, use the link that Daniel is putting in the chat. Before you go, I want you to know that our next webinar is scheduled for January 14, and we will be welcoming Lisa Mihalik-Quinn of Reach Every Voice and the co-authors of her new book, Julie Sando and Dr. Edlin Vallejo Peña. Their new book is called Breaking Barriers for Non-Speaking Autistic Students, a toolkit to enhance communication in learning environments. The link to register for that webinar is in the chat. And before we close, I want to mention that xMinds provides these resources free of charge so that every family can access them. We rely entirely on the generosity of our donors to make that possible. If tonight's session was helpful to you, please consider supporting our work and by going to www.xminds.org/donate. Thank you so much to the MCPS staff for taking the time to share such valuable information, but most of all, thanks to all of you for spending your evening with us. Have a good night.